Good morning.
She's here.
Welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session. And today, under consideration on this May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, everybody, is the consideration of the Courthouse project. Gary Schmidt, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. First, all commissioners are present. Commissioner Schrader is online, and the other commissioners are in the room. Yes, commissioners, this is a momentous day for you and for our county. This is to discuss the proposed new county courthouse, a project update, but actually today is also decision day. If you are moving forward on a new building or not, and if you are, the general funding program, which is either a public-private partnership or a traditional conventional method, are really the two options. The Board of County Commissioners has been discussing this for 40 years, 40 years. For 23 years, this has been on the campus master plan for Clackamas County. And for 6 years, staff has been working on preparing you for this decision today. So thank you for your leadership, commissioners. Thank you for the staff work on this. I will turn it over to Gary Barth, the project coordinator, to tee up the conversation and then to have a discussion and then for you to make a decision. Go ahead, please, Gary Barth.
Thank you, Gary. I'll be brief. Good morning, commissioners. Gary summarized the project very well. It's been a long journey. This is a milestone date today. We've completed an extensive application process for the Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction and Improvement Fund. We're prioritized as the next top courthouse project after the completion of the Jefferson and Multnomah County courthouses. We've had tremendous state support. We've got legislative request in now for the 50% funding in this legislative session. Multiple efforts have been undertaken since that application to come back and provide the board with a refined scope of the project, the refined cost estimates, and how we could fund our share of the program. We had an extensive work session a couple of weeks ago and walked the board through significant amount of work that has been undertaken. The board directed staff to develop a replacement project approach that would fund the county share of the project without new taxes. We've did a value for money approach that recommended the P3 approach as the best approach to provide the highest value, which is one of the options before you today. But as Gary mentioned, you also have the option of doing a traditional approach or to not move forward. The effort began last fall to put together the P3 procurement package based on board direction. We've completed all the elements of that, but nothing will happen from this point forward until we have the outcome of this decision today. This is a milestone date. We've got a project timeline that's laid out that shows about 18 kind of critical milestone tasks. The first one began in April when we went to the state for our legislative update. This is task number 3 of 18. All the subsequent tasks are dependent on the decision that's made today. So those 18 tasks don't sound too daunting. They're actually quite high level. There'll actually be hundreds of tasks beyond this, but those are the highlights that lead you all the way up to ribbon cutting and building occupancy in 2025 if we receive direction to move forward. So with that, I think that summarizes.
Thank you, Mr. Barth. The last meeting we had of this, I ended our last meeting with 3 questions for the board to consider. And they were, does this board want a new courthouse? Number 2, can we afford it? And number 3, if so, by what mechanism should it be delivered? And I know that most of our board members, if not all, has done their due diligence in studying multiple pages of documents going forward. Let me be clear to the public listening to this. This has been somewhat controversial in some circles. But I am dedicated, as I've always said, not to raise taxes. This project, although costly, can be done without raising taxes. And that's a promise that I'm making to anybody listening today. We have aligned our budgets. We have done the hard lifting and taking a look at our budgets. And Commission, we will have to continue on that disciplined path going forward because we can't afford everything. We cannot afford to fund every good idea that may come in front of us, how worthy it is. So today we are deciding, or not, what that path is going to be. And we have an important choice to make. As we look at our funding priorities going forward, our budget people, our finance people say we can afford to do this. It's our willingness to do this, and I think we can get there. My expectation on this project for any people listening is that it will come in below bid. It will come in under budget and under a timeline because it has to. We will not be building a Taj Mahal structure. Our next process after this, we're going to be sitting down with the designers where I am inviting the public to join in that process. I'm inviting builders to join in that process, to build a courthouse that is not only affordable, but will last the test of time. And the reason why we're in this situation is our population has grown to a point where now the legal eagles tell us that we need 14 judges to account for all of the necessary law-abiding prosecutions, filings, everything that goes on in a courthouse, and other people can talk to the importance of that. We currently have 11, is that right? So it's slowing down the wheels of justice quite considerably without our space. And many presiding judges have talked about that, have presented facts to us on that. When I was a former commissioner serving years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, we talked about doing this. And I believe the previous board on February 18, 2020, was first presented with the PEEF-3 process. So it's been over a year for the members of this board who are on the present board to roll up their sleeves and do the work, knowing that this date would come today when the legislature has said they will pay half a courthouse. You know, we're in such a fortunate situation with that, as governments struggle all across America with aging infrastructure and aging buildings to be able to build a fine structure that will last the test of time and have somebody pay half of it, and then we can do it without raising taxes. And I want to thank the very generous tax-paying public who pay their property taxes on time, that fills our general fund, and we are managing your money well. You've been very generous in paying your taxes through COVID. Many of you have lost jobs. Many businesses have gone under, which is a very sad state of affairs. But with all of these bad situations in mind, we must look to the future, because I want to live in a time of prosperity, as I know you all do. Now, I know my commissioners want to speak, and they have questions, and now is a great time to do that with Gary Barth in the room, able to answer. And I believe there are people listening, the experts online too, Gary, for the technical questions. Commissioner Scholl, would you like to start off?
Yes, thank you. There's no doubt that this county needs a new courthouse, and there's no doubt that the time to take action on getting that started is now. But also, there's no doubt that the people of this county expect a courthouse that is functional, yet austere in design and affordable in cost. And I believe that this can be done. I have some concerns in the documentation, Gary, that there was an estimate of $773 per square foot for this, potentially for this courthouse, correct?
Correct. I think we have that in the
Yeah.
Q&A attached.
Okay, and that's the highest cost per square foot of the courthouses that have been listed as examples that have been built in the country.
Actually, I
And-
think there's a couple that are higher. We're not the highest in
Okay,
that estimate.
Okay. My point here is this, that when we get to the request for proposals, I'm concerned that we have some sort of ability to hold down that cost per square foot. And in the request for qualifications, I'm hoping that we look at design architectural organizations that have a track record of building quality buildings in a design they're able to actually bring them in at a relatively low cost. So my concern is this. If we say yes today on the P3 approach and we move to the next step in achieving reality for this courthouse, that as we move along, that we have some assurance that we're not going to run into a situation where you're going to come back in here and say, "Oh, we got a problem, we have an unexpected cost here, now your courthouse project is going to be more expensive." Okay?
Yes, Commissioner, I'd be happy to address that. You have a couple of key assurances there. One is we will establish, under your direction, an affordability ceiling so that all prospective bidders have an idea of our budget considerations. And then what we have discovered through our research is the competitive environment of a public-private partnership is what really drives your value. You get the best market value. Right now, we're providing you very, very high-level cost estimates using a couple of highly skilled but individual cost estimators. Here, you're going to have teams of designers, contractors, building operators coming together and putting forth their best effort to design an innovative building at the best value for the county. And we believe through that competition, at the very least, you're going to see the best the market has to offer in terms of meeting our needs. And then ultimately, you don't commit to that until you sign the project agreement at the end of that process that specifically outlines the building at about a 30% design with a guaranteed maximum price kind of set in. So you have the ultimate decision-making, and we will provide the board with regular updates through the procurement process to keep you informed of how that's progressing.
Okay.
And thank you. I did want to mention our three consulting teams are all online, ready to answer the questions. We have Marcel Ham from Rebel and his team. I'm just introducing the principals. We have Tom Ness from WT and his team. And we have Eric Peterson from Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood, our law firm, and his team are all on the line and prepared to answer any financial, transactional, or legal questions you might have as well.
Okay, Gary, for the design folks listening, I'd like to just keep one thing in mind, what Mies van der Rohe said one time, less is more. And the people of this county want more for less. Okay, thanks, Gary.
I can share one example with you. Miami-Dade County, they prioritize value, and they received very strong proposals. And they got innovative design solutions that they had never considered that ended up being the best approach that they chose.
Yeah, well, that's an exciting idea. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't see any lights on. Are we done talking?
No, I'm happy. I just want to make sure everyone has if needs
Oh, you're up.
someone in front of me. I've asked for everyone's indulgence. Thank you. First of all, I just want to come out of the gate and say I'm not adverse to public-private partnerships. I want to make that perfectly clear. And we have engaged in those in the past, and I expect we'll be engaging in those in the future. I think my concern about this, as I kind of stated at the last meeting, frankly, I think we've been on, I would just call it a track, and, to some degree, that's what the board instructed, despite perhaps, without my support along the way to pursue this P3 model. And I'm not really sure we have objectively looked at and entertained thoroughly. That's just my opinion. So I'm not here to upset anyone. But I just go back to the last packet on April 21st, and on the page 26, 7, and 8 of the packet. And I look at the comments about the difference between the two models. And one of the bullets on that says essentially that, the pros and the cons about that, which is on the 26th page. And then on today's packet, in response to one of the questions, it makes this statement. And the statement is in the bullet, one of them, the first one, under question 2. The county does not have the experience or capacity to efficiently manage a project of this size and complexity, and so is more prone to delays, cost overruns, and change orders under a conventional delivery. I don't disagree with that, but I maintain that we can, it's our job to hire that expertise. We can't pretend that we can actually manage that, and I think we can hire that for a lot less than that rough $100 million number I threw out the last time. We built this building and opened it in 2004. And remember this chart, this bar graph chart that was in the packet, and I think this is probably the most, I'm going to wallpaper my office with this, I think, especially during budget cycle and all the future budget cycles to come. Because this really speaks volumes if you really look at it and analyze it. And I've had some friends of mine take a look at this that I trust with their financial expertise and look at all the materials. And I want to say that if you look at this model, the gray area, the risk, whether it's this building we built in 04 or it's DSB that we built in 08, we have not experienced these numbers. So essentially, had we factored that, we're experiencing the savings because we don't experience those high risk. The O&M, relatively the same under both models. So we're operating these buildings just fine. We haven't had any big blips and so on. So another thought that occurred to me is that, all right, so if this risk factor is real and we go all the way to the end, the very last year of this chart, okay, does that risk stop after in year 30, 35 or year 36 or 37 or 38? So, that to me, this is more speculative, and I have concerns. I really have concerns about that. So I agree. Chair, you said it. Can we afford it? Staff said we can afford it. Yes, we can. Do we need it? We need it. I support the courthouse. I want to make that perfectly clear as well. But I think we can do it, and I think our responsibility is to do it as low cost and have the least impacts for years to come. I think this is probably the biggest decision we'll ever make, probably the biggest decision I will make in my 10 years here, and it will affect the commission and the county for the next 30 plus years, no matter which way we go. We can affect it as positively as we can, or we can take the risk and increase our payments. Just look at the payments. And I go back to this again. And Christina's got this ready. If anyone wants to see it online, see the bar graph that I'm talking about, she can post that. Thank you, Christina. Look at the payments. The payments could be, $2-3 million less a year. What can we do with $2 or $3 million extra general fund money? I think we can do quite a bit. I think we meet a lot of unforeseen needs in the next 35 years. I don't know what those needs are, and I doubt that anyone in this room knows what those unusual circumstances are going to be for Clackamas County or this region in the next 35 years. So having the ability of having some extra money to meet those needs and to grow our reserves is, I think, more possible in this particular, this is laid out. If we don't fall into this understanding that somehow, we're going to experience all these risks. Granted, we can do the courthouse conventional and bring in P3 elements to it. We can bring in electronic controls. We can do it in a contract, public-private partnership. We can do that for the energy, the solar power generation, common. Done that before. We've always done that. Every project I've been part of, we've done a P3 with PGE or someone like that. We can bring in a P3 for the air handling system. All of the complex nature, where the risk is, we can manage that if we have the key staff. I asked the question last week. If we proceeded with the P3, would we still need to hire some expertise to make sure the oversight, everything is, and the answer I think was yes, but we haven't monetized that or looked at the cost of that. So either way, we're going to be hiring some expertise. And if we can hire expertise and pay a little bit more, obviously a lot less than $100 million, I think we have a potential of saving millions of dollars. And I think that's our, at least to me, I feel it's my fundamental responsibility here to be as wise about this as possible. And I use the wastewater treatment model, and that is far more complex than a courthouse. The things that can go wrong in a wastewater treatment plant with all the machinery and the controls and everything is super complex. The risk is super high, but we managed it. We did it. So I just make a plea to my colleagues that after reading the material, I have not found anyone who I know who does not see any significant advantage here to the P3 model. And actually, there's more advantages and opportunities to save money under the conventional delivery by bringing in the expertise. And we can also manage the low payment through good faith and credit, and we can build in, we have reserves, we can do everything we can to make sure we can meet those financial needs in the first 5 years, similar to the P3 model. Okay, that's all doable. We can replicate every advantage here and save money. So, folks, number one, I'm for the courthouse. We need it. I believe we can afford it, but I think we need to save as much money and build a good product. And if you do all go forward and vote for this P3 model, I want to insist on we having off-ramps, as many off-ramps as possible to revisit this whole project to make sure it's being managed correctly, because I think it's become more painfully clear as time goes on.
Commissioner Savas, do you have a question for staff?
I have no questions.
Okay.
It's comment.
Because you have said this over and over again, and I'm going to remind everybody in the room, this P3 model was presented back in February 18, 2020, at which time it was over a year that these questions could have been answered for you, and I believe they do. However, I'm going to take exception to one fact that you keep continuing to misrepresent, and that is $100 million extra. Gary Barth, will you talk about that?
Chair.
No, Commissioner Savas.
I asked to speak.
We are going to get answers to the
you asked for me to speak.
accusations that you have made
And
here
then
today.
you have interrupted
You're going
me.
to get an
So why don't
answer
you
to
let me
the
finish my
accusations
comments?
that you've made here today, because we're going to move forward on this. But I don't want anybody listening to this to think, oh, it's going to cost us an extra blah, blah, blah. Gary, would you please answer the question?
Interrupting.
Yeah, well, guess what? Gary Barth answered the question, and there's also respect and honesty on that as well.
That's right.
Which you have not been. Gary Barth answered the question.
In October of 19, we were directed by the board to conduct what is called a value for money analysis. And I would encourage anybody listening to just Google value for money. And it's a technique that's used by public agencies throughout the world to determine the best value for public infrastructure projects through fairly sophisticated analytical processes. We hired Rebel who is our specialists in those kinds of analyses to do this project for us. We assembled a team within the county. We worked on it for 3 months. We presented the results to the board in February of 20. And the key distinction here is it's only a fair comparison on those two charts is if you assign a value to the risk the county retains if we do the project ourselves. And this differential is really the equivalent of an insurance premium. And the simple analogy I can use is if you only make a decision to buy insurance based on the cost of the policy, you would never buy insurance, but you factor in the risk that you're covering in that decision. And the P3 model transfers the majority of project risks over the life cycle to the private developer. And we have certainty through the contractual payments then that any risks that occur, and we've identified over 110 risk factors known to date, any combination of those that occur over time will be covered because we've done that. Over on this side, we would have to cover that, and the county is self-insured. For example, on this building here, I honestly can't say if we've got adequate capital repairs reserves budgeted annually to take care of the DSB and the PSB for life cycle needs as things wear out that we would have in this P3 contract.
Do you know if, when these buildings were built, the PSB and DSB, if they were over budget at all?
That I don't know if
Nobody
they
really
were
knows
over
the answer
budget.
to that, and I think when we look back on these times, yeah, of course those buildings were cheaper. My gosh, has anybody taken a look at what's happened with building costs going forward? Paul, would you like to answer more specifically on your $100 million? Would you like to parcel that out for us and take a stab at the risk?
Well, if you, you don't have it in front of you, but it was in the last packet, and I'm adding the numbers up again here, just to ask Gary. But on page 27 of the last packet, the top blue bar says expected county risk. So I'm adding that up, so you all have it. And you'll get a pretty large number.
Chair Smith? I'm
Yes.
just going to run to the restroom real quick, and I will.
Go ahead, Commissioner Fisher.
While doing the math.
You betcha.
Remind the board, we do have Rebel on they are the experts who produce this analysis for us, so we do have them on the phone if you need any
Okay,
technical
well,
questions.
maybe they can
answered.
take a stab at that.
But Gary, what is the total of the risk? That's
The risk is
demonstrated in
Commissioners, we responded in the Q&A that's attached to the packet. It gives you a formula of how that risk premium is calculated. It's the delta between the weighted average cost of capital of the private entity versus the municipal rate if we were to do full faith and credit. And that's a formula that's, as Marcel Ham responded in the Q&A, is a widely accepted approach at assigning a risk premium for the value for money analysis.
But my question is, what does that add up to? How much does that add up to? That risk, which demonstrated in the gray bar, how much is that?
I do not have the
It's 104
spreadsheet.
It's $104.4 million. That's where the number comes from. I didn't make it up.
It's the premium it's the premium assigned to retaining risk. It's the risk retained premium assigned to,
Okay.
so we can do apples to apples comparison. If you compare just a municipal rate to a weighted average private sector rate, you would never, ever do a P3.
So Gary, what is, I have a question for you. What is the delta between the payments the county will make under the conventional versus the P3? What's the delta between the two?
Marcel, are you on the line, your team that has the model in front of you? You want to answer that question? Because I did not bring the spreadsheets in front of me to answer that level of detail.
I just promoted him, so he should be on shortly.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner Fisher, the number I came up with was $104.4 million is the total of the top bar on page 27 which is demonstrated by the gray, which supports this, is $104.4 million. Not
And
enough
Commissioner
right back
Savas,
here.
that's nominal dollars that you're adding up. That's not discounted to net present value over
I
a
know,
30-year
I
term.
understand what that number is, Gary.
I'm explaining for the public.
So my question to anybody out there, do you expect to build a building like this with absolutely no risks regardless of the model we use? No cost overruns, no problem at all, and I think, it's our due diligence to bring in, during the public process, all those people that can help us mitigate cost overruns and problems that none of us can really foresee on this, and I think to assume that if we use a different model than the P3, we're not going to have cost overruns. We have cost of money, of course, going forward. In that 100 million, we have our interest payments, we have our maintenance. Going forward, we also have capital expenditures, and to think that we will not be replacing, for instance, portions of an HVAC system in 20 years, I think is naive on any building.
Chair,
And when I was looking at the budget on this, as commissioners are going to see in the budget proposals, we're going to take very seriously reserves and contingencies for the maintenance on our existing buildings, because it has to be done. It just has to be done. The current maintenance on the courthouse is just over $1 million a year. I wonder if the public realizes we're already paying $1 million a year on an old courthouse, and it's not adequate whatsoever. And you immediately transfer that over to a new building is not going to take $100 million a year. Over time, in 20 years, you're going to have to start replacing items. Of course, we're going to have to keep up on the maintenance, but I just, I think we're wasting our time here. Paul, if you can get us some answers, I see a light on. You have an opportunity to say what you need to say, but we're going to move on with this.
yeah, well, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Just want to make it perfectly clear. So, Chair, please don't distort what I said. I made it clear the last time, and if I had an opportunity to finish, I could, but you cut me off. So let me make that perfectly clear. But
Well, answer the
what I
question
said
and
the
get
last
on
time,
with it.
what I said the last time was that the potential to save is $100 million. Sure, there's going to be cost overruns, but you're not going to experience $100 million of cost overruns. You could experience, maybe a cost overrun of 10, 15, 20%, and that would be approximately 10, 20, $25 million. But the potential to save 75 million or whatnot is something that we ought to do. So you just mentioned that it would be only $1 million a year under this model for operations and maintenance. If you look at the chart, Chair, it's on the P3 model, the maintenance of this building is $3 to $6 million a year. Is that correct, Gary?
The new building will be 2.5 times larger than the space that we're currently taking care of today. It'll be more efficient on a
Well,
cost per square foot.
I'm just saying the chair just stated that this new building won't need, only need $1 million of maintenance. It's embedded in here. So I don't think we've studied the numbers, apparently. The numbers are there.
The current courthouse is requiring over $1 million in maintenance and operations.
So is there an answer yet from our staff online here as to the delta between the payments of the P3 and the payments of the conventional?
Marcel, are you with us?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Did you hear the question and can you respond?
Yep. Yeah, so I think what we're showing in the cash flow graphs too is that we're expecting the risk-adjusted cost of the conventional delivery to be 440 million nominal dollars, and the P3 delivery 430 million dollars, nominal dollars. And yes, part of that risk-adjusted cash flow is an expected value of the risks and uncertainties.
So I'm not sure, maybe you didn't understand the question. So on these green bars, which shows the payment, the dark green bars, what's the delta between the conventional delivery? Yeah, there it is on the screen. What's the delta between the darker green bars on the between the P3 and the conventional? The delta.
It's probably around 100 million, yes?
Okay? Thank you. That's all I
Commissioner
have.
Scholl?
Yes, Gary and Mr. Ham, this chart we're looking at, this is based on 773 per square foot.
This was based on, because this was conducted, yes, I think we did update this
Yeah.
for the most recent.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is based on $773 per square foot. And if the design professionals can bring that down, then that
This will come.
expected county risk piece of that graph is going to come down also. And the other point here is for Commissioner Sabas. If we didn't use the P3, we would be required to go to the taxpayers in the county for, isn't that correct?
No, we can do it on good faith and credit. No taxpayer, no tax initiative would be required. Is that correct, Gary?
That is correct, yes.
We won't be going to the taxpayers,
No.
period.
No.
Yep.
Exactly, no.
Yeah. General obligation bond requires voter approval, full faith and credit does not.
Okay,
And it relies on existing revenue for repayment.
and we're not doing that. Yeah.
The-
I see a red light on.
Commissioner
No, I
Fisher?
see a red light on.
Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. Gary, I want to thank you and staff and all of the teams that have been working on this. I know this has been quite the education over the last few years. And just recently, I had a conversation with a constituent who was educating me a little bit more about the CMGC model, which sort of in my mind as a social service person, it looks at like the continuum of care of a project. We look at that in human services, but I really look at it as that being considered a best practice when you have from the design, build and maintenance. It's a whole process of what is considered best practice, and we can absolutely do that very effectively through this P3 model. And the piece that really sold me on this concept is that we don't make a payment until the building is constructed, which is critical for our financial situation, and that we're still paying off this building, still paying off that building, and I think we have a little bit of time left on the Brooks building down the street. So once those get paid off, we're going to have more flexibility to move those dollars over to the courthouse to cover these payments. The other piece that I really like is the, you look at what happens in public building process. How many times have we read news articles when it's like, oh my gosh, this is over cost, this is over budget. You have to, it's like throwing tomatoes in a way, because it's so, I don't want to have that here. I like the certainty of transferring that risk. To me, it's almost invaluable for as a public entity to purchase the expertise upfront to do it right. And so I am all in favor of this. And Madam Chair?
Yes,
If
go
there are
ahead.
no other in the queue, I'd like to make a motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I move that we proceed with the procurement of P3 development partner with defined project affordability ceiling, customary in P3 procurements. This will require adoption of a board resolution at a subsequent public hearing on May 20th, 2021, with findings that support the use of a P3 alternative project delivery approach.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Commissioner Fisher has made the motion. Commissioner Scholl has seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Christina, call the poll, please.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
No.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 4-1. Thank you, commissioners, for all your constructive questions, comments, and as we move forward on this, there's going to be a lot more heavy work to be done. This is just a very, very beginning. I would encourage all of our commissioners, if they want to be present at the design phase going forward and getting the absolute best value that we can. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.